Hello, everyone. Here we is again in the Valley of the Dry Bones, the conditions that face Black people in America. And we are at a tipping point where we don't know which way to go, but we know we have to go up. Been down too long. Now, this one is called The Black Political Personalities. With the coalition and the assistance of the scallywags and carpetbaggers, the blacks were able to build up a powerful Republican political machine in the South. Naturally, all this could not have been possible without the passage of the 14th and the 15th Amendment, which gave to the black man citizenship and the right to vote, and the aid of Freeman Buell, the Union League, and the U.S. Army, and the Northern blacks who came to the South to help their brothers and sisters. As a result of this assistance, many blacks were elected to public office. When the Civil War ended, there were 5 million whites and 4 million blacks in the South. Out of these numbers, 700,000 blacks and 660,000 whites were registered to vote at the beginning of the Reconstruction period. Almost 200,000 whites could not register to vote or hold public office because of their participation in the rebellion. Pertaining to the number of registered blacks and white voters, these were large figures considering the fact that 18-year-olds and women could not vote in those years. As a result of the political organization of the freemen, many blacks were elected to various public offices. Example were the mayor of Natchez, Mississippi, Robert Wood, and W. Cunney, who ran for mayor of Galveston, Texas. There were hundreds of blacks elected officials in the state legislatures of the Deep South. In South Carolina, there were 84 blacks in the first Reconstruction legislature. In the cities and towns, there were black judges and sheriffs. The state of Virginia sent one black congressman to Washington. Georgia sent one. Alabama sent three. North Carolina sent four. Florida sent one. Louisiana sent one. Mississippi sent one. South Carolina sent eight. Some of these states had black superintendents of education, major generals, speakers of the House of Representatives, associate justice of state supreme courts, secretaries, treasurers, and lieutenant governors. And there were two United States senators from the state of Mississippi, Hiram Revels and Blanche Bruce. Mississippi had one black lieutenant governor. South Carolina had two, and Louisiana had three. Lieutenant Governor PBS Pinchback became governor for 43 days upon the impeachment of the previous governor. Although blacks held many offices in the South, they never elected any U.S. senators from South Carolina, even though they had a superiority of over 100,000 in population. Furthermore, the blacks had a population majority or a registered voter majority in South Carolina. Mississippi, Alabama, Florida, and Louisiana, but not once did these states elect a black governor. This was a sad state of affairs. Let us examine the social and psychological behavior of white and black people during the post-Civil War period in order to arrive at a reason why there were no black governors in that state. The blacks did not elect any black governors because some had fear in their hearts. Some thought that the office was a white man's domain. Some thought that whites had more brains. Some felt obligated to the carpetbaggers and scallywags, and others thought that they had to conciliate and pacify the whites. The senator from Mississippi, Hiram Rebels, a black man, spent so much time consolidating hostile, deceptive white people that he alienated black people. This even happens today. Some blacks spend so much time in white society that the masses of black people don't even consider them black anymore. Also, the white man used a psychological tool known as the power of suggestion. When the state convention met in South Carolina during this period, white men indicated to blacks that it would be more diplomatic to elect a white chairman. This is tantamount to saying that only a white man could do the job. It is a psychosocial brainwashing. The power of suggestion is employed in many mass media today, in newspapers, and on radio and television. Oh, we see that going on right now, big time. It is so pervasive in our society that it will require a separate book to deal with the subject. Psychological suggesting is the mass media is a form of brainwashing. As a result, the black people are more a victim to it because they may read fewer books, watch and listen to the sound boxes more than any group. After the black man received his voting rights in 1868, it was the general feeling among whites that the black man should do the voting and the white the directing. What they meant was that the whites would rule and hold the dominant positions. The whites took a paternalistic attitude toward the blacks as a result. Some blacks believed that they should take a back seat or side seat and not offend the sensibilities of the whites. We have a case in point when the state convention met to nominate a governor in Louisiana during this period. The black politician Pinchback took a back seat and withdrew his name from nomination, thinking that it would be unwise to have a black governor the first time. This is one of the mistakes he made. He later regretted it, and blacks suffered from it in future years. After Pinchback withdrew his name, there were two names remaining in nomination, those of Warmoth, and a white man, and Dumas, a black man. There was a tie between these two on the first ballot. Most of the delegates were black and previous slaves and did not like ex slaveholders. Before the next ballot was cast, Warmoth stressed the fact that his opponent, Dumas, had owned slaves, a black man. When the ballot was cast and counted again, Warmoth won by 2 votes. The second mistake here was that the black delegates did not forgive their own black brothers. They should have elected Dumas, the lesser of two evils. Because they did not, they missed their chance to have a black governor. Finally, by the time Pinchback decided to run for governor in later years, the whites had gotten complete control of the election machinery. Those who do not learn from history are doomed to repeat it. This is why blacks have repetitive setbacks, because they do not learn from history. Yes, we found that out in this last election. Some say, I don't want to learn. Almost almost the old slavery stuff, or I'm not an African, or I am an American. But most blacks are not treated like Americans, but as less than Americans. I say that over and over and over. We are not we're not full Americans. Really, only ones is really the Indians, but that's another story. Although we did not have any black governors, nevertheless, we had a larger number of blacks elected officials in the South during the Reconstruction period that we have today. With this fact in mind, do you think we really advanced? The black politicians and their white allies changed many of the outdated, inhuman, and discriminatory
Today is Wednesday,
laws
March 26th.
that were on the books for many years in the Old South. These black white state legislators enacted better, more equitable, and more humane laws for everybody. Some of the highlights of these laws were the establishment of public schools. Under the old traditions, blacks and poor whites were excluded from schooling. Don't that kind of remind you of how they treated the handicaps? Really, they looked at your status and your race as a handicap. General manhood suffrage, the granting of rights to females, such as a divorce and the right to hold property, equity of civil rights, and a system of assistance and senior citizens. They abolished the old slave laws, penal incarceration for debt, and use of sitting in stocks and whipping posts, and property requirements for voting. Under the old slave system, the masses of the poor whites who did not own property were prohibited from voting. Also, under the new system, the masses of poor whites and the blacks who did not own property were now considered in state representation according to their mere population rather than by their ownership of property. At this time, I don't want to fail to mention the fact that these legislators established social service institutions for the orphans, blind, disabled, and insane. As you can see, these were reforms of extensive magnitude. It was no wonder that the big plantation owners and other racist writers hated the Black Poor Coalition and state governments of the South. In later decades, the struggle for social and labor rights developed into a fight between the rich and the poor, and the rich used the I used the ideology of white supremacy to divide the poor white workers and the blacks. There will be more on this subject later. A seeming plus came to the black people when Congress passed the Civil Rights Bill in 1875, which gave blacks the right to equal treatment in hotels, public conveniences, and theaters and other places of public amusement. Possessing a sizable amount of the political power in the states of the Deep South, the blacks were moving up and riding high in the saddle. What was the general mood and the social life of the blacks? At least on a higher level. The great writer Lerone Bennett Jr. gives us a classic example. Negroes and whites were going to school together, riding on streetcars together, and cohabiting in and out of wedlock. Negro men were marrying white women in the South, but it was more fashionable. Investigators reported for white men to marry Negro women. An interracial board was running the University of South Carolina when a Negro professor, Richard T. Greener, was teaching white and black youth metaphysics and logic. A man in his age went to mail a letter, and the postmaster was black. A man committed a crime, and in some countries was arrested by a black policeman, prosecuted by a black solicitor, weighed by a black and white jury, and sentenced by a black judge. It was enough to drive some men mad. It was enough to warp some man's judgment. Come with James S. Pike, a Northern reporter, into the South Carolina House of Representatives, the first Western assembly of its kind with a black majority. The speaker, Pike reports, is black. The clerk is black. The doorkeepers are black. The little pages are black. The chairman of the Ways and Means Committee is black, and the chaplain is coal black. But this social atmosphere did not last long in the South. The forces of counter revolution and reaction of the ex slaveholders were at work, undermining and eroding, slowly but surely, the foundation of Black social, political, and civil rights all over the South. Intimidation and mass murder became the order of the day, and gradually the Black was deprived of all his civil rights. By the 1880s, the state governments in the Deep South had returned to a complete control of the plantation owners. Wow. Remember that. 1875, when the Civil Rights Bill was passed in 1875, blacks was riding high. Things was getting so much better. They had representation. But then, as we see what's going on now, they trying to bring the black man back down to his knees. Next, we're going to read about how and why the ex-slaveholders seized power. We're going to find out how they did it. We already know that the atmosphere was changing, and also they were doing it by intimidation and mass murder. Are we getting ready to see that now? I mean, I think we already said it. All right, thank you for listening. You all have a wonderful day. Next time, we're going to read some more of The Valley of the Dry Bones.